The reported backstage reaction to CM Punk's return promo at AEW Collision has reportedly been revealed. Also an update on the ticket sales for future AEW Collision events now that CM Punk has returned to the company and the premiere episode of AEW Collision has aired. Details on that, plus Kenny Omega is reportedly not set to be at AEW Collision this coming weekend in Canada. In addition to that, he's also set to miss this coming Wednesday's edition of AEW Dynamite on TBS in Chicago as well. Details on that. Plus, speaking of Kenny Omega, he's set to main event the upcoming Forbidden Door pay-per-view this coming Wednesday on AEW Dynamite. Bryan Danielson is set to call out Kazuchika Okada ahead of their match at Forbidden Door. Saraya is set to return to AEW imminently. Amanda Huber is now working in production for All Elite Wrestling. Wardlow recently, of course, he got his car broken into, and AEW turned that legit moment into an angle. Details on how they did that. Will Washington talks about his relationship with Tony Khan, and a new AEW game has been announced. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of All Elite Wrestling. Let's start off talking about that promo that CM Punk cut upon his return to All Elite Wrestling this past weekend during the premiere episode of AEW Collision. And according to Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select, as one would expect, there was some cage rattling due to CM Punk's AEW Collision promo. Some things that people backstage took note of included Punk removing the AEW mic flag, with it being noted that it was almost exactly how he'd done the same thing during a WWE angle in the past as well, kind of preparing, or at least making the audience remember that maybe we were going to get somewhat of a pipe bomb moment, even though it kind of really wasn't a pipe bomb, was it at all? There were definitely people on both sides of things that said that Punk was just getting out what he needed to get out, and others who felt like it was hypocritical to make comments about being, quote, soft after being upset about his Hangman program, the promos, and the spots outlined. Now, it should be noted that while there were non-disclosures applied to the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega, and CM Punk with one another, but not Hangman Page and CM Punk, hence why CM Punk was able to say the things about Hangman Page that he did during the recent ESPN article and interview that was released last week. Again, that's according to Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select. Now, another big line that the roster noticed was the "one Bill Phil" comment, which CM Punk claimed a WBD executive called him, that being David Zasloff, not just an executive, the Warner Bros. Discovery CEO. Now, it's widely speculated internally that this was in reference to a possible all-encompassing AEW broadcast deal with Warner Bros. Discovery that was rumoured to approach the $1 billion mark. After the match, Fightful were told that Punk was checked by trainers as a precaution, but of course he was fine. He is not injured. He is fine. He managed to make it through a match. Now, those that Fightful spoke to who had heard from the Young Bucks were told they took it lightheartedly and told those that inquired that things were okay. Punk, as we spoke about previously, is actively planned for this week's upcoming AEW Dynamite on TBS, though it hasn't been announced as of right now at the time of recording this video. Also, his planned match with Kenta at Forbidden Door hasn't been announced, which Fightful have heard is not 100%, but AEW is still hoping will happen. Of course, we could get an announcement on Wednesday, on Friday, or possibly Saturday as well, so there is still plenty of time for a match between Kenta and CM Punk at Forbidden Door to be announced. At times, Chris Jericho was a planned feud for CM Punk, which Fightful haven't heard anything on in quite a while. There were also Samoa Joe and Switchblade Jay White singles matches planned during points of his return, but changes were made. So as of right now, we really don't know what CM Punk's first feud is going to be. Some people criticized AEW Collision last weekend for saying it didn't really plant any seeds, and maybe this is why, because they actually haven't settled on who CM Punk's first feud is going to be against. Now, in terms of ticket sales for the upcoming Collision shows, initially the ticket sales weren't very strong out of the gate, but the question has become, has that changed now that the first episode has aired on TNT and now that CM Punk is also back with All Elite Wrestling? An update has emerged on AEW Collision ticket sales following the debut episode of the show, which featured the return of CM Punk. Now, Collision ticket sales, as I mentioned, hadn't been doing impressive numbers past Chicago, likely because AEW had already been selling tickets in the same arenas for for so many other shows, but things now look to have picked up, with confirmation that Punk is indeed actually back, and now that everyone has gotten a look at what Collision is actually going to look like moving forward, Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer has described tickets as moving very well since Saturday. Ticket sales for the next Collision show in Toronto for Saturday, June 24, have now topped the 3,000 mark, which might not sound great in isolation, but Meltzer states it's great considering where it was at 2 weeks ago. The show that was doing the worst of the lot was the Hamilton, Ontario, Canada show for Thursday, June 29, which is set for just one day after Dynamite in the exact same venue. A few days ago, ticket sales for that show were only at around 800, but now they've been boosted to near 1,500. Another factor to consider is that there have been some special offers to get the tickets moved, but it's pretty evident that the return of Punk and the quality of the debut episode of AEW Collision as a whole has had a considerable positive effect when it comes to ticket sales. Now, what are your thoughts on that? Is that because of CM Punk? Is that because of the first episode? Or is that just because, as I mentioned, of these special deals that they've been doing to move ticket sales as well? Or is it all of the above? Let me know your thoughts about that in the comment section below. Now, what is quite interesting actually about AEW Collision is that even with some critics of AEW, it's been reviewed fairly positively, at least for the premiere episode anyway. One person who actually has praised the premiere episode of AEW Collision on TNT is none other than harsh AEW critic Eric Bischoff. This past Saturday saw the debut of All Elite Wrestling's latest venture, that being AEW Collision. Many fans may have expected podcast host and former WCW executive Eric Bischoff to pick apart the quality of the show, as Bischoff is an often outspoken critic of AEW's television product and CM Punk in particular. However, on a bonus episode of 83 Weeks, Bischoff's thoughts on the show were perhaps surprisingly overwhelmingly positive. Quote, "I more than enjoyed the show," Bischoff said regarding Saturday's AEW Collision premiere. "It completely erased the last 12 months of my opinion of AEW, and I'm going into it with an entirely clean slate." After that, Bischoff ran through some of the highlights he saw in the new series. "I can't overemphasize how impressed I was with Kelly and McGuinness," Bischoff continued. The retired wrestling executive shared that the style of Kelly and McGuinness is the closest match to his preferred type of commentary that he's heard in a very long time. Additionally, Bischoff had strong things to say about the booking of Collision. Quote, "Whoever booked this shit, whoever was in the room, whoever had the most influence over the formatting and pacing, don't let that person ever get out of your sight," Bischoff stated. "Maybe it was Tony. I don't think so, because I've never seen anything out of AEW come remotely close to the level of near perfection of the formatting for the show." While it's clear that he enjoyed the show, Bischoff wasn't completely without criticism. Quote, "Please, somebody take a look at the backstage promos because they really hurt the overall product," Bischoff said. "They've demonstrated here that they have the ability, they just need to lean into it a little bit more." So do you share Eric Bischoff's praise pretty much for the show, or are we going to see AEW reverting to type and it become more similar to AEW Dynamite in the upcoming weeks? Let me know your thoughts about that in the comment section below. But certainly surprising there that Eric Bischoff was full of praise for a show that many people indeed did enjoy. Now, Kenny Omega, one person who reportedly was at odds with CM Punk as part of the Elite, although it must be said that CM Punk has gone on record to state that his issue really wasn't with Kenny Omega. Nevertheless, Kenny Omega reportedly is not going to be at AEW Dynamite this Wednesday, in addition to also not being at Collision this coming Saturday as well. Ahead of one of AEW's biggest shows of the year, one of their top stars appears set to miss this week's episode of Dynamite. This Sunday at the Scotiabank Arena in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling will come together once again to present their Forbidden Door pay-per-view. The show will see Kenny Omega put his IWGP US Heavyweight Championship on the line against Will Ospreay in a rematch of their Wrestle Kingdom 17 Classic, although it now appears unlikely that Omega will be present for this week's television tapings ahead of the pay-per-view. Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer newsletter is now reporting that Omega isn't set to feature on either AEW Dynamite or Collision this week, despite his major involvement in this Sunday's crossover pay-per-view. Quote, "Kenny Omega will not appear live on either this Wednesday's AEW Dynamite or this Saturday's AEW Collision." Now, it must be said, the key word there is live. He still could appear in a pre-tape. We'll get to that in just a second. Now, tomorrow's episode of AEW Dynamite is set to emanate from the Wintrust Arena in Chicago, Illinois, while Forbidden Door will take place from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Fightful Select recently reported that sources close to CM Punk have claimed that the former AEW World Champion is set for tomorrow's show. However, the company have yet to officially confirm that this is indeed the case. As of this recording, it's unclear as to whether Omega will still be involved on either Dynamite or Collision this week via a pre-tape, although with his match with Ospreay expected to headline this weekend show, it's hard to imagine they will have zero presence on either TV shows whatsoever. Additionally, Omega's elite stablemates, Hangman Adam Page and the Young Bucks, are also set to be announced for, or yet to be announced for, either of this week's television tapings, with the trio also yet to have concrete plans announced for Forbidden Door as well. Of course, if we get any more updates regarding Kenny Omega's status for either Dynamite or Collision, we'll let you know in a future video. Now, speaking of Kenny Omega as well, it's going to be a big weekend for him, even if he's not on Collision, because he's set to main event the big Forbidden Door show in his home country of Canada. Now, on a show that only has 4 matches announced at the time of recording, we'll see Bryan Danielson taking on Kazuchika Okada, Sanada defending the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship against Jungle Boy Jack Perry, MJF defending the AEW World Championship against Hiroshi Tanahashi, and Kenny Omega defending the IWGP United States Heavyweight Championship against Will Ospreay. Of course, MJF has made his feelings about his upcoming match against Tanahashi quite clear, using statistics to back up his points. Danielson has promised to bring the Rainmaker to the desert, with Okada saying Danielson will be experiencing Kazuchika Okada to the fullest. Will Ospreay has made his intentions towards Kenny Omega clear following Omega's victory over him at Wrestle Kingdom 17. PW Insider Elite has now revealed that the main event of the AEW New Japan Pro Wrestling Forbidden Door show was actually discussed over the weekend in Chicago. As of the weekend of the AEW Collision premiere, PW Insider Elite reports that the belief over the weekend in Chicago was that Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay would be closing the Forbidden Door pay-per-view in Toronto this Sunday. Now, a lot of people are looking into this a variety of ways because, of course, Tony Khan recently teased that the Forbidden Door show will feature some massive moment that could potentially set up a big match at the All In event at London's Wembley Stadium. Is that the reason why Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega are main eventing the show, or is it just because nobody's going to be able to follow that match? Let me know your thoughts about that, possibly main eventing, in the comment section below. Speaking of Forbidden Door, another big match set for the show, of course, is Bryan Danielson versus Kazuchika Okada. Now, the second New Japan AEW Forbidden Door event is set to take place this Sunday, which will play host to the highly anticipated dream match between Bryan Danielson and Kazuchika Okada. Danielson made the challenge to Okada back at New Japan Dominion earlier this month, with the two yet to go face-to-face ahead of the show. Well, that could all change after this week's AEW Dynamite, as Tony Khan has taken to Twitter to announce that Bryan will call out Okada on Dynamite this week. While this doesn't necessarily mean Okada will be present on the show, it's likely that we could hear that iconic coin drop ahead of the dream match on this week's show. Other New Japan stars have been announced for the show this week, with Minoru Suzuki set to team with Chris Jericho and Sammy Guevara against AR Fox, Action Andretti and Darius Martin. As well as Suzuki, New Japan World Television Champion Zack Sabre Jr. is set to team with Daniel Garcia against the AEW International Champion Orange Cassidy and the Ring of Honor Pure Champion Katsuyori Shibata. So a big week of crossover, not only at the Forbidden Door pay-per-view, but also on AEW Dynamite as well. The question is, will we see the Rainmaker on AEW Dynamite this week? One person we are likely to see return to AEW television is Saraya. In recent weeks, AEW Women's World Champion Toni Storm and Ruby Soho have been coming out to the ring as a duo without the third member of the Outcast, Saraya. It was reported last week that Saraya was currently off AEW television for undisclosed reasons. In an update from Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select, Saraya is set to make her return to the company imminently. The report also notes that Saraya has not been present at the recent AEW television tapings. The Outcast were in tag team action on the debut episode of Collision, with Tony and Ruby losing to Sky Blue and the New Japan Strong Women's Champion Willow Nightingale. Saraya last wrestled on the May 31st episode of Dynamite, where her and Chris Jericho were defeated by Britt Baker and Adam Cole in a mixed tag team match. So it looks like Saraya is going to be returning to AEW television very, very soon. Now, a few backstage details. One is in addition to the production element of AEW television, Amanda Huber is now working for All Elite Wrestling in a production capacity. Since the tragic passing of her husband, John Huber, known to AEW fans as Mr. Brody Lee, Amanda Huber has been embraced by the wrestling industry, with All Elite Wrestling welcoming her as a member of their community outreach team in October of 2021. PW Insider are now reporting that Huber has a new role within the company, as it is believed that Michael Mansory has recruited her to join the company's production team. Quote, Amanda Huber is now working on the production end of AEW. She had been working in the community outreach area of the company, but we are told was recruited by Michael Mansory to come over to production. Amanda Huber is undoubtedly a beloved figure within AEW, and thus it's great to see both her and her son Brody Lee Jr. continue to keep the former TNT champion's legacy alive as part of the company. If we get any more details on what specifically her role is in production, of course, we'll let you know. But congratulations to Amanda Huber on her new role in All Elite Wrestling. Now, people knew this anyway, but it's something that's kind of just surfaced again today. Wardlow, this isn't new news, but Wardlow has had 3 reigns as AEW TNT champion since he first captured the title last year, with him most recently dropping the title to Luchasaurus on the debut episode of AEW Collision last weekend. Prior to the change, Wardlow captured the title from Powerhouse Hobbs, who beat Wardlow for the title months before. The angle saw QT Marshall align with Hobbs as part of QTV, with the QTV faction being responsible for breaking into Wardlow's car and stealing his possessions, including his TNT championship. The story of Wardlow's car being broken into made news the days prior, with QTV promising to reveal the truth, with the situation seemingly like a blurry area in regards to whether it was real or not. In an update, Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select has provided some clarification on this, saying that Wardlow's vehicle being broken into and having his possession stolen was, quote, legit, with AEW later using it to further the angle between Wardlow and QTV. Powerhouse Hobbs was a name that CM Punk singled out as a star who could flourish in AEW on the newly launched Collision show. Hobbs' last televised match came on the June 7 episode of AEW Rampage, with him picking up a quick victory over Caleb Crush in a squash match. Wardlow, who was defeated by Luchasaurus for the title on Collision following interference from Christian Cage after Wardlow was hit by a camera by Christian Cage to assist Luchasaurus, has yet to respond to losing the title. But again, to kind of nip this one in the bud, it was a real situation that they turned into an angle. But they're not going to do that with everything in AEW. Just look at CM Punk and the Elite. Will Washington is one of the newer faces around All Elite Wrestling, and he's spoken about his relationship with Tony Khan. In May of this year, former reporter and podcaster Will Washington joined AEW as the company's wrestling administration coordinator. Washington was a guest on a recent episode of AEW Unrestricted and discussed how Tony Khan had been there with a helping hand when he needed it. As Washington described, their relationship goes back a long way, but changed in late 2022, with Washington saying, quote, I was a software developer for a really long time and lost my job back in December, and I tweeted very vaguely about it. It was a very vague, rough times ahead kind of tweet, but the cool thing was Tony checked on me after that to see what the problem was and if I was okay. And I was honest with him and told him what was going on, and over the months he was a big help for me. He said straight up to me, let me see what I can do for you. Washington would reveal that Khan's words weren't hollow, with the AEW owner going on to set up an interview for him with another company under Khan's ownership. The interview led to the belief that Washington's skills would be better suited in AEW, which was something that he and Khan would both acknowledge, going on to say, Tony checked in every once in a while. He'd say, hey, did you have a conversation with them? How did it go? And I'm like, I said the same thing. I should probably be working in AEW. And at one point, we finally had the conversation of, what would it take for me just to work in AEW? And here I am. The role of AEW Wrestling Administration Coordinator sees Washington overseeing continuity and aiding in long-term creative and working directly with Tony Khan. Before joining AEW, Washington had a near 2-decade career in reporting and was also a podcast host. Washington was recently revealed as having a seat at the creative table in AEW, with Dave Meltzer providing further insights into the role, suggesting that he was part of a wider creative team. Finally, of course, we know that AEW Fight Forever is going to be coming out next week, and there are going to be live streams of the game coming to the channel, so you can watch me fail miserably at trying to play that game. But the highly anticipated AEW Fight Forever video game is set to launch at the end of the month, with the game set to release on all modern gaming platforms very, very soon. Fight Forever will join AEW's Elite General Manager and Double or Nothing Casino as officially licensed AEW games, and we can soon add another to that list. Per AEW and Warner Bros. Discovery, another AEW mobile game is in development titled AEW Figure Fighters. The game, set to launch in 2024, is set to be free to play and will feature 3D animated versions of AEW wrestlers battling it out in the ring. A full press release was released later on earlier today, and as I mentioned, the game is set to launch in 2024. So if we get any more details about that closer to the time, we'll let you know. But there you go, guys. It's the latest AEW news for you. Be sure to smash the like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner. As always, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.